Yo, what's going on, everybody? I hope you're having an amazing day. You already know what this is by this point. This is Y and Z, the divide. Two generations just coming to the table, having a conversation. That's my guy right over there, the in-house millennial generation Y. That is Jay Clark. What's going on with you, Clark?
It's another week above ground, keeping our head above water, making our way where we can.
Man, please, man. I'm over here in New Orleans. Even though my hair might be above water, we're still below sea level anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But man, I'm doing good. I'm your in-house Generation Z, the best to ever do it, the best to ever will do it. They try to hate on us because they can't do it. It is the good old 2000s babies. For the most part, we 2000s babies. So, they try to hate on this. Look at all that hate on his face, man. Look at all that hate on his face. And
Oh, it's coming.
I'm
It's
coming out the
coming.
door. I'm coming out the door hitting.
Okay.
I'm coming out the door hitting today. There has been on multiple occasions and on this podcast where the statement came forth that, oh, the 90s was the best time to be a child.
Okay. Come on now.
The 90s childhood was the best.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Blah, 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 blah. It's a bunch of hoopla because no, it was not. And
Ooh.
I'm going to tell you why. Now, I don't know if my generation would still even qualify as the best. So I'm gonna take it like in decade perspective, right? You got the 80s, the 90s, and we're talking about childhood. We're gonna give it from like what ages 3 to 13 or 2 to 12. You want to do that?
Yeah, that's the early years.
Right, the early years, not your really teenage years, but like the early years of your development or
Let's
whatever, right?
let's recall what it is. It's somewhere in middle school. It's somewhere,
Right,
you
right.
know, somewhere between 6 and 8 is where, definitely before high school, but somewhere between 6 and 8 is where the crossover happens. So yeah, that up to about 13-ish. Let's call, becoming a
Yeah,
teenager. Yeah,
yeah.
I like that. Okay.
So and I don't think the 90s was the best. Now, don't get me wrong. If you were a young adult in the 90s, I feel like that was prime time. It was amazing. Who didn't want to be a college student, a late high school student, or whatever in the 90s? Who didn't want to do that? I mean, you were coming into adulthood in a urban charged country,
Okay,
right? Because
we're not talking about adulthood here. Get to your point about the childhood.
but childhood, bruh, be for real. Y'all had slime, everything was different colors. It was just filled with food dye. It was weird. It was weird. It was weird.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought this up because we've actually gotten a couple questions around this, and it was all a matter about when's the right time to get into this, and so it's deep. First of all, it's funny coming from a generation that has no idea what it was like, and you trying to tell me it wasn't. Okay,
What?
the 90s really was the best time to be a kid. Anybody who was a kid in the 80s can maybe make a similar claim because the 80s was a great time to be a kid too. But what the 90s did was took everything you had from the 80s and took it to another level. The biggest thing is because you had all these deregulations where it came to how you could advertise kids that happened in like the late 70s and really exploded in the 80s, which is why you start getting all these kid-focused products like cereals tie into like we see the explosion. You got the explosion of Saturday morning cartoons with like your Transformers and all that and
Right,
He-Man
right.
and all that kind of stuff and tying. You got great movie franchises in the 80s, Terminator, action movies, great time to be a kid. Nobody's going to argue that. The 90s, though, took what happened in the 80s and really built upon it and expanded it to a whole nother level. So, number one, your number one example of why the 90s was great, which is going to be funny as because of what has happened recently, is simply Nickelodeon. You had a network dedicated to kids. And like y'all grew up in a world where y'all had multiple options. No, this was the
But let's be real
place
though.
to go with
For
shows that you
y'all,
saw
for,
yourself in and huh?
for y'all having Nickelodeon, Disney Channel hit its prime time in our decade.
but still never touched what you got in the 90s.
Oh, please. Oh,
It still never touched
what?
what Nickelodeon was in the 90s was revolutionary. Like, and let's see, you're talking Rugrats, you're talking Doug, you're talking Guts, you're talking Legends of the Hidden Temple, you're talking Wild and Crazy Kids, you're talking Double Dare, you're talking Nick Arcade. That's the early part of the decade. Then you start getting into the All That's, the Keenan and Kells, Cousin Skeeter, Clarissa Explains It. Like you had an entire network that was dedicated and focused to you as a child, which was just as wild as you wanted to be as a kid. And that includes all, all the promo for it, the giveaways. Like every kid wanted to be on some Nickelodeon show at some point in time. But let's put that aside. Okay, that's one reason. You talked about Disney. Bruh, the Disney Renaissance was the 90s.
But
You
Disney did
talking
not hit its stride until the 2000s. You
no.
had Phineas and Ferb, Hannah Montana,
Bruh,
That's So Raven.
we're not talking TV shows here. We talking, and you got to give me a little flexibility here for the start of the Renaissance, which is 89.
Okay.
Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, Tarzan, Mulan, and eventually, essentially, Toy Story at the end of the day. Like, it's everything. And then because you're talking about we still playing outside. You're not, you're getting the advent of technology. Technology is coming along, developing upon what was happening in the 80s, but it's still not overwhelming. You got the 90s was essentially the promise of the future, but still connected to how things were done in the past. And so it was a perfect convergence point. Like literally, especially when we're talking about culture with technology and all that, the 90s was the peak of the mountain. After you hit 2000 and mobile phones kind of come in and take over, like as we've seen, it's all been downhill. But like
But
Super Soakers, Fox Kids, WB in the afternoons. Like you talking Batman the animated series, you talking Superman the animated series, X-Men, which we have seen killing it with its reboot in X-Men 97. You got Spider-Man the animated series. You had the Fantastic Four animated series. You had the Iron Man animated series. We got Power Rangers. We got Gargoyles. We got the start of Pokemon. Like
that's because y'all was bad kids.
get out of here. Get out of here. Please.
Y'all was
Please.
bad kids. Y'all needed violence on the television.
Not all of it was violent. Not all of it was violent. Hell, you
no, seriously, bro.
You got Animaniacs. Like the 90s was was a peak of just experiences and things that you had targeted to you as a kid.
Now, don't get me wrong. Was the 90s one of the biggest? It truly was one of the biggest jump, like from looking from the 80s to the 90s. That's one of your highest grossing years as far as like creativity, because the stuff that came forth in the 90s, don't get me wrong, it was like, whoa, where in the world did this come from? Because it basically had nothing of that nature to build upon that fast. You see what I'm saying? It was almost like from the 80s to the 90s, they jumped 3-4 steps.
It's not really. You really have to look at it. Like I said, it's really, and that's why I'll like anybody who was a kid in the 80s can make a similar claim. Like it's 80s and 90s is the two top decades to be an actual kid in, no question. And the 90s essentially built upon everything that happened in the 80s or was a result of things in the 80s and then kind of accelerated with what we see, because like I said, it's all about that kind of technology starting to really come into play, as in it's not just, okay, computers and these things can happen. Is now, you got early cell phones in the 90s, you got early laptops, and like, so you start to get the peak of what technology is going to do in life, and it's creating all these advances. And you start to get that into your regular life.
But like, if that is true, if the 90s are the starting point of that, the 2000s, or at least 2002 to 2012, that is the golden age.
Because you already started.
That's when things started hitting numbers that it never hit before. False. They were on their stride.
Technology is starting to take over in the 2000s, and you start to see the negative effects. Kids ain't going outside as much anymore. It's all about the screen.
That wasn't happening by the end. That was like after 2012.
No.
There was a sweet spot in there where technology was great and it was still having a childish effect.
It was a small sweet spot. You're talking like a couple years versus an entire decade. You're not going to sit here and tell me a
Oh
couple years
two,
sweet spot is better than an entire decade.
oh
And
two to 2012 on that
bruh,
10-year time span.
bruh, you not telling me as someone who was born and who doesn't know the world pre 9/11. Like let's put it that way. You don't know the world pre 9/11.
And
9/11
see,
really changed ish like that to where it's like it was
yeah,
like and so you're trying to tell me all this based off a post 9/11 world. No, no. Pre 9/11, the world was just that different. And that's also one thing. Like, you're not going to tell me a decade essentially post 9/11 was better as a kid than a decade pre 9/11. No, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And we haven't even talked about the music yet. Like, you talk of growing up as a kid with all like, and not just R&B and hip hop. Like, this was peak mainstream, which carried over into the 2000s. But mainstream culture in the 90s, bruh, bruh, come on now. Come
let's
on.
that's
And then, and
no
then,
no no no
and
no
then we get to
no
experience. You got In
no
Living Color. You got
no
Martin. You got the
no
Fresh
no.
Prince of Bel Air.
Hey,
You got
hey,
Sister
this is it's
Sister.
not
No, it's like
fair.
there's nothing you have
Not
that's touching
fair for
anything
you to
nice.
bring those. That's why I specify being a child. Cause I
You were watching
know
those things as a child.
you think I know.
Yes. Yes. Fresh Prince was the thing to watch. And bam, here, okay, so here's another dropper. Like, must see TV to know that you had to watch these things so you could talk about it at school the next day. TGIF, an entire block. How many Thursdays on NBC? Like, you knew what to plug into. It wasn't a question. We were all aligned, but you had your differences because we've seen. But the mainstream culture was such a driving force that you got a little taste of it in the mid 2000s, but you weren't really old enough to really understand. By the time you were truly enjoying your childhood, which is the late 2000s and early 2010s, it's all downhill, bruh. Like, mainstream is going down, social media is disrupting things, screen time this, screen time that. Like, imagine a world without all that stuff, to where it wasn't where are my friends at. I gotta call them up on the phone, or I just gotta ride around my bike on the neighborhood to see where they may be congregated. Like, it was a magical time, and there's no way you're gonna sit. We're gonna sit here for a minute. Like I said, we've got to, there's no way you're gonna sit here and tell me that the '90s wasn't really as great as it was. There's no way.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. The 90s very superior. Very superior.
Mm-hmm.
Very superior. But I still don't think that the 90s is the golden age.
So what are you gonna say is the golden age, and why?
The golden age. Now, don't get me wrong. A great point was made speaking about a post 9/11 world. That's very true. I have no argument for that because, like you said, I don't know what it was pre 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally going to be the same argument made for a pre-COVID world and a post-COVID world. It's literally been two different dynamics that we've experienced over the last 4 years compared to the 4 years before that.
I would say COVID, while a longer thing, it has been impactful, is not as impactful as 9/11 was. Nowhere near.
The only reason why I say I compare COVID to 9/11 is only because COVID flushed everybody onto social media like we've never seen before. Like,
I agree with you putting it in the
right,
same,
right, right.
like it's in the same ranks. But I think what you're going to see is we're going to, in a sense, get back to a pre-COVID world. Like, low key, you're already kind of back there a little bit. Things have been accelerated to an extent that things that were coming down the pipeline in the future have been accelerated because of COVID, which is different than 9/11. 9/11 literally changed life. Like, as
The
a
whole
kid,
shape of the world.
as a kid, here's one example. As a kid, when my dad used to go on business trips, we could go to the airport with him, go up to the gate, chill with him at the gate, see him get on the plane, and then watch the plane take off. If he was coming back, we could meet him at the airport, go into the airport, wait for him at the gate, and greet him coming off the plane.
That's
You
crazy.
have no idea what that's like. Unless you got a ticket, you
Never
can get
will.
to the gate in this world.
I'll never know what that's like.
So I get the correlation you're making, but I would I yeah, 9/11 was a bigger shift
In
than
just world society.
yeah, yeah. Like
And the thing is, I think as far as like when I speak of like the golden age, so this is the qualifications, right?
okay.
An age in which social media is doing what it's supposed to do without all of the major negative effects that we saw coming in mid 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
You're still having that human interaction that social media isn't disrupting with.
Man, you was getting that in the 90s. And I think it was you because you had
But your technology wasn't as good as it could have been. That's the
but
only that's the
that's the
only
beauty.
thing that disqualifies to me
That's you
the
didn't need the
90s from the
technology.
picture.
And that's the beauty. You didn't need the technology. Like a lot of this community, what the technology, NIE, something like social media has done has allowed people to get in touch with more people around the world. But
Right,
we're
right.
not going to say that people weren't getting that community in the 90s. Like you had different types of media segmented to different audiences. Like you don't know what it is to see a newsstand full of a bunch of different things targeted to different audiences.
A
Like you
newsstand?
because magazines were the thing back in the day.
Nah, seriously.
Like
Serious.
seriously, like whether you're talking about we've all seen Ebony, Ebony, and I'm not gonna say 90s was the peak for Ebony, but it was you had your Ebony, you still had your Jets. I
It
remember as a kid,
really
you had your Boy Scouts magazines, you had things like Life for Kids, you had a bunch, whether it was some kind of fan magazine, you had fan club, like all these types of things that we see on social media were in their own space in the 90s. And so that's
right.
why all the difference is the technology in the 2000s and on has really just congregated in one space and has sped things up. And that's the thing, it was slower. It wasn't, okay, what's today's headline or what are we talking about today on X or
Right.
Twitter? And then tomorrow's a different thing. No, it was this month's magazine drop. That magazine content would last for a minute. This TV episode dropped. That TV episode would last for so things were longer. Like you look at like a lot of this is going to center on media because that's things we can measure and can see. But you look at
Right, right.
runs of movies in theaters. Like a movie would be in a theater for 9, 10 months. A song would be on the chart 9, 10 months. An album would be around for 9, 10 months a year with 3, 4, maybe 5, 6 singles if it was really good. Like the pace of things being slower to really allowed you to enjoy and get into it. And FOMO wasn't as big as a thing. Like there was FOMO because if you didn't catch it, you didn't know where you might be able to catch it again. But then,
Right, right, right.
we had like take TV seasonality, like fall premiere season was something. You weren't getting all these new shows during the summer to keep you inside. No, we was outside. But you had your fall TV premieres, and then that would course the season would not be no 10 episodes, 12 episodes. No, we were getting 22, 24 episode seasons of our favorite content, really, really getting into a chance to enjoy and sit with it. And if you missed anything, well, that's when the summertime would come around. They'd be airing the repeats, and that was the chance to catch up or check in on it and see if you can get that episode you missed. Bro, like the way life is so fast for y'all was speeding up for y'all in your childhood. Like, no. Like it was slow, it was enjoyable, things were segmented and targeted. What the 2000s did was built on what the 90s had and expanded it, which is what you're supposed to do. But like I said,
Right,
that
right.
gave y'all so many more options as you mentioned before in some episode when we were talking about why things aren't special, y'all began to have so many options, things weren't special.
Right, right, right.
As a kid in the 90s, you knew what your options were. It was you had Nickelodeon, which wasn't 24 hours, because come 8 p.m., it would go to Nick at Night and start showing the old stuff. You had your afternoon blocks on primary channels, and that was it. Disney, as we've seen, depending on where you were, was either a premium or it wasn't. depending on where you were. So it wasn't available for everybody.
Wow.
Cartoon Network was just kind of getting started, and Cartoon Network didn't really pop off until the late 90s. So
Right.
it's like you knew the things. It was like, okay, yep, this is for me. This is special because this is what I have. I don't have 50 million different options. I have my couple, and that's it. And then let's not talk about like Toys R Us, KB Toys,
Oh,
like all this stuff that was being built upon previous decades really kind of peaked in the 90s pre-tech. Like, and I think that's the beauty is you had the integration of, okay, we're starting to see how technology can come into our lives, and there are some cool things happening. A la
right, right.
Furbies, Tamagotchis, all these different fad trends that we see come in, but it wasn't everything is tech, 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 tech. No, that wasn't the case. Where it is like nowadays, it's everything is tech, 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 tech. There was. So man, get out of here. Get out of here.
You know, I stand on my argument.
There's no business for you to be standing on, bro. Like, cause literally there is nothing that you could come in and be like, yep, this was better in the 2000s as a 2000s kid than it was in the 90s. There's literally nothing.
Phineas and Ferb.
No, no. What you trying to talk? You trying to say Phineas and Ferb is better than any children's TV show, even animated that came out? Animaniacs is better than Phineas and Ferb. Like there's nothing you have that is better than anything in the 90s. Literally, all we've seen is y'all had more options and y'all don't appreciate nothing. Which is why 90s content and 90s
I don't
nostalgia
think
has
it's
stayed
that
around for so long.
I don't think it's that we didn't appreciate anything. I think it just gave us the ability to enjoy more things at once.
You're and you don't appreciate something like that. Like, come on now.
You can. See how I turned it like that?
No,
You see?
let's
Yes.
let's put it this way.
Yes. We enjoy more things at once. Yes. Ah,
Where is the post 2005 nostalgia? It doesn't exist.
it does.
Where and in what way?
It's in my childhood. Disney Channel original movies. Like movies coming straight to TV. You can watch it just for that first time. It's premiering on a Friday night on Disney Channel. You can't watch it anywhere else. It's amazing. It's 10 out of 10. You sit around and you watch it. Then you go out the next day, meet at the basketball court, and you talk about the movie that just came on last night.
That was the 90s.
That was
That was the
my
90s.
childhood. But
Your
the
after school specials, your Friday night made for TV movie. Like we had all that. We had all that.
that,
We had that.
but our stuff was more, it was better. But I'm gonna tell you why.
How?
Because we just took what the 90s did, which was so seasoned and so good. And we was just like, let me just add a little this and add a little that in there. And bam, you get the 2000s.
Your childhood is literally, and even I would say your culture now as an adult is literally, oh, this was great from the 90s.
Let's repurpose
Let's
it.
try and make it our own. And we try, and it's nowhere near as good. And
Yeah,
we
no,
don't
I'm
understand.
not gonna.
We don't
No, no, no.
understand
We're
why.
not gonna say nowhere near as good, but it's very palatable for us.
Okay, let's do it this way. Let's do it this way. Go tick for tack versus off dome. Your top 10 TV shows from your childhood. Go.
From is this like one network? Is it just
It could,
all
it,
over across?
it could be if you want to go one network, we can go one network. So if you want to do your Disney versus my Nickelodeon, we can do that. Or you want to try and give yourself a wider scope, we can do that. I've got
Nah, because
I've got that
if we
flexibility.
let's be honest, if we go wider, I'm gonna lose easily.
Even if we go one network, you're going to lose.
Eh.
So let's go your top 10 Disney because that's your childhood versus
All right,
my
let's
top
go.
10 Nickelodeon.
All
Go,
right, you ready?
go.
That's So Raven, Hannah Montana, Phineas and Ferb, High School Musical franchise changed the game. I'm sorry, you cannot lie. It changed the game. You got Camp Rock, changed the game. Thank you. Let's see here. I don't know if I want to put this one in there. A lot of people might not be in the same persuasion as me. I want to say Corey in the House. I want to say Cheetah Girls. I want to say three more in there. Let's add Wizards of Waverly Place. Bam. Good Luck Charlie. Bam. Let's add in last one. Gravity Falls.
Can you give me another five?
Another five.
Yeah. How deep
There were
can you
like,
go? I'm curious.
yeah, I could give you another five.
Give me another five.
So let's just say like Pair of Kings. Let's say a cartoon like Kid versus Cat, a cartoon like Kick Butowski. Let's just say you have your Parent Trap, the rebooted version. Let's not go there. Let's not go. I probably shouldn't have put that one because I mean the OG is the what, the 80s?
60s.
60s, crazy. And then y'all reboot in the 90s, and then another one for me. And then I don't know. Let's just put
You see,
something
and
else.
that's your
No,
problem.
no, 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 no.
Your depth is questionable. Like you got outside that 10. You're like, I can give you 10, like nothing. You ready?
Go ahead.
You're not touching all that.
Okay,
You're not touching Rugrats. You're not touching Ren and Stimpy. Am I going all Nick?
You can go all Nick.
Okay. You're not touching Clarissa Explains It All. You're not touching Guts. You're not touching Double Dare. You're not touching Wild and Crazy Kids. That's 7. You're not touching Our Real Monsters. You're not touching Cat Dog. That's 9. You're not touching Cousin Skeeter. That's 10. You're not touching My Brother and Me. That's 11. You're not touching a kid show like Gullah Gullah Island. That's 12.
Gullah Gullah Island, really good.
Hell, you're not touching SpongeBob. SpongeBob started in the 90s.
Whoa.
SpongeBob started in the 90s.
Whoa. Pause. You will not put SpongeBob in this.
You're not touching SpongeBob. That's 13.
Take SpongeBob away.
Okay, I'll take away that cheat card. Fine. Legends of the Hidden Temple. You're not touching that. You're not touching the entire concept of Snick on Nickelodeon. That's 14.
Where is Power Rangers?
That wasn't Nickelodeon.
What was Power Rangers?
Fox Kids.
Right.
And so here's the beauty. Okay, because you open the door because as you see, it's right here. Specifically in terms of something like Power Rangers. Because, in the Power Rangers fandom, a lot of people are like, oh, why do people have love for Mighty Morphin? It's Mighty Morphin this. It's Mighty Morphin. Like, they complain that you got to understand Power Rangers in the day as a kid didn't just air as you're used to things airing. You're used to things airing week at a time. So, week
right. Every week, get a new episode.
Power Rangers in the Fox Kids block was 5 episodes a week. 5. You got one Monday, you got one Tuesday, you got one Wednesday, you got one Thursday, you got one Friday. New. So, for example, like that first season of Power Rangers is 60 episodes. And so, and in the Power Rangers fandom, there's this whole thing about, the 6th Ranger coming in. And so, for example, all the time. That usually happens now around episode 5 or 6. Power Rangers, it happened a month in back in the day. That's episode like 15, 20. And so it was that 5-part series all week long. So it wasn't just, oh, we love this show because it's airing once a week. No, we were getting a new episode every day right after school.
That's crazy.
And so that's what I'm talking about. Like, think like there were periods of time tailored for like the Fox Kids block wasn't an all day thing. No, it was like a 2 hour block from like 3 to 5 on your local Fox network
I
with
will
shows,
say,
with the blocks of like Power Rangers, Batman, Superman, but and that's what y'all it's when you have these moments like, yeah, this is our time to tune in. This
I
is our
will
time
say
to feel
that's
this thing.
probably one area. So it was like for kids in the 90s, it was like it's not going to be a whole lot, but it is what it is. And what it is really, really good.
Top tier. What you
Then when
top
it
tier?
came to us, they were like, but we want to give y'all more. And
Okay.
instead, but you can't as a child develop full loyalty for one thing because you want to get a little bit of everything, but that caused us to pick and choose so much and try to take in everything.
Uh-huh.
So like we could not watch a new episode of this because it was another new episode of this coming out on another network. And who knows when you so we gotta like see I remember vividly of me trying to switch back and forth between two new episodes of something on different channels, hoping that when one gets to the commercial, I can switch over to the other one. You're
Yeah.
right. That's
That
a
that computer
lot for
wasn't
a
there.
child.
Because like I said, the 90s represented the okay, we saw how this worked in the 80s. Okay, we can start to grow and expand this in the 90s. And then when you get to the 2000s, it's like, okay, yep, you getting Disney as a regular channel. You get Nick, you got Nick, like Nick Jr. was something that started late in the like Nick Jr. wasn't even a thing until the late 90s. Like because back in the day, Nick would have their kids programming like that stuff in the morning, then would shift into the normal kids programming in the afternoon and evening, and then at night, like I said, at 8 o'clock, it became Nick at Night showing.
Oh,
Oh,
but let's not even talk about Mickey Mouse Clubhouse.
you you don't want to talk about your version of the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse versus the '90s one, do you?
The 90s one was not as successful. Let's be honest.
It didn't need to be as successful. It was still churning out, and we saw it was Mickey Mouse Clubhouse that had them boys like Ryan Gosling and Justin Timberlake singing Jodeci. Come on now, come on.
But I mean, I try to stay away from like children television because the 80s are gonna come in and just say Elmo and Barney.
Barney was a '90s thing. Barney was '90s.
Barney is 90s. That's right. That is right. That is right. Sesame Street was 80s.
Sesame Street is all time. There's no one decade. Like there's no one decade you can really be like
It's
that's
evolved. It's
yeah.
evolved with the time.
Like
I
but like
mean, not I mean, got to like the 2000s and was like, well, broken over here.
we're not gonna get to no recommendations because we only got a couple minutes left. But it is what it is. But like the '90s, yes, was that great? And like I'm only scratching the surface here. Like we didn't even get to any pop culture events that everybody was talking about.
Nah,
Everybody was following. Like the '90s was really the peak of the mountain. We didn't know it was then because you just naturally think everything's going to keep getting better, going to keep evolving. The '90s really was the cultural peak, and it bled over into the early 2000s. But what we saw in the 2000s was that shift of, oh, we are on the other side of the hill now, and things are kind of going down a little bit in terms of some of these cultural aspects that have been shared between generations that now are no
right.
longer being shared in the same way.
And it's always, I mean, and it was always because of the side of technology that nobody saw,
Mm-hmm.
which was the more we push the technology, the more we might not have human interaction.
Yeah, like I said, that you don't see that coming into it. I'm sure there was some genius or somebody who was calling for it. You can always find that stuff, but it wasn't on top of mind back then. And that's the beauty of it. It was simply we're living life. The life we're living is a little better than previous due to these advances.
Right.
Versus now it's yeah, we're living better lives because of some advances, but we don't necessarily feel like it is. We long for some of these simpler times and simpler moments. We long for that. Oh, Thursday night at 8, we all gonna be tuned into these similar channels, like because we're all watching the same thing at the same time. Versus now
Right.
it's being released on streaming. You watching it one day, I might not get to it because there's just so much other stuff. No, like there was beauty. Like I said, it's that mainstream experience. And of course, this is in the light of no decade is perfect. This is all in the light of
Right. Right. Right.
drug wars. Of course, in the '90s, you're talking Bill Clinton and his three strikes. Like, no decade is perfect, but especially when you're talking about as a kid, you're slightly isolated from some of these things. So those things
I
aren't
mean, you
top of
can't
mind.
even. I mean, the
Yeah, no,
2000s started off 9/11. Come on, like
yeah.
I can't. We can't talk about the downfalls of the decades, or
Every
whatever.
decade gonna happen because 80s you got crack. It is what it is what it is. But it's because then I didn't even touch on sports. I mean, you got Michael Jordan dominating.
Let's not. That's
You got
not
the
fair.
Cowboys
It's
doing it.
not.
Like you got Ken Griffey Jr. Like, and I think that's the beauty of it too. Sports was just starting to grow into the seriously commercial thing that it has become now. Like now, sports is big business. It was business back then, but it wasn't.
But the what the 90s did for sports coming into just like everywhere, you had people being knowing because to be a sports fan meant that you knew about the stuff. A normal person wouldn't know about it unless they were a fan of it. But the 90s introduced sports to where any person knew who Michael Jordan was. Like entertainers started on a higher level, started becoming a household name. And that's most definitely, I kid you not, that's most definitely what the 90s did. Yeah.
Let's call this part one because I'm sure we'll come back to it another day.
Oh, we're gonna come back to this one. I'm coming back with better evidence.
Okay,
Cause
you can try. You can try. But yeah, this is Y and Z conversation between the generations, or as I like to think about it sometimes, when Y puts Z in their place and let them know what it really is.
you know, he think he's doing that. I'm telling you, I just gotta this is just like a nice little fight. You know what I'm saying? He get round one, maybe round two. Sometimes he'll get round three.
Oh, I got the stamina because that's the thing. Like, once again, we didn't get
No,
deep
no, no,
into
no, no,
this.
no,
We didn't
no.
get
If
deep
we
into.
know anything, Generation Y be ready for a nap.
Anyways, like, share, subscribe. If you got a comment, please share it with us. Again, this is all in fun. This is all in fun. We just,
Yeah, yeah,
discussing things. Everybody's got their things they enjoy from the generation, but yes, the 90s was that good. The 90s is either one or two. If it's not one, the 80s is number one and the
yeah.
90s is number two, but 90s number one. Anyways, Jay Clark, the Y, Xavier Lewis, the Z, them crazy Gen Z babies. Once again, like, share, subscribe. Uh, Thank you. We appreciate you if you spent any time with us. And until next time, don't be crazy like them. Peace.
Make sure y'all eat y'all Wheaties like them.
Bro,
Peace.
the Wheaties box back? Come on. Yeah. Part one. Catch y'all later. Peace out.